Good morning to everyone online and here. My name is Sylvia Van Wy. I'm the Family Community Engagement Specialist here at Walker. And this is our first ever combined coffees with the principal. To my right, we have our presenter, Cami Iwata, is that correct?
Perfect.
From the Orange County Department of Education. It's going to give us a very special presentation on prevention of drug use in our teens and all the strategies. Then beyond her, we have Liliana Guzman, which many of you know, is a family community engagement specialist at Kennedy and set up this extraordinary reception for everyone. So please enjoy. And then to my left, I have Ms. Jennifer Sasai, our principal at Walker, and Ms. Seema, Sidhu, the principal at Kennedy. And if you would like to say anything, you're more than welcome. They'll be able to pick you up.
Oh, I'll come near you.
Okay.
You like to say?
So we are just so excited that you're all here today in person and online for this very important topic. All of our coffees with the principals from now on are going to be combined together. So those of you who have students at both Walker and Kennedy, you only have to go to one, or you're invited to one instead of two. So we're really excited for you to be here. I'll turn it over to Dr. Sidhu.
All right. It's honestly an honor to be here. I love working with Jennifer. You know, we go back to way back. And then also we work together as assistant principals. So it's an honor to serve all of you. This is my first year as a principal at Kennedy. I was there for 4.5 years as an assistant principal. So I'm just really excited to work with all of you with OCDE. And then we also have our school resource officer, Wilson, in the house. So he's just going to be here as a support system. He may, kind of add on, or if you have any questions for him, feel free to ask. Is everything okay? Sorry. Okay. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So thank you. So we'll turn it over to Cami.
All right. Thank you. And definitely chime in if you need to. But my name is Cami. I am from the Orange County Department of Education, part of our alcohol and other drug prevention program. So what I get to do is I get to go out to the different districts, do parent presentations. We do student curriculum in certain districts as well. But super excited to be here. So thank you for inviting us here. We're gonna start with our prevention. It starts with you. Today's presentation, some things that we're gonna cover. We're gonna talk about recent statistics related to youth alcohol, drug use, types of drugs most commonly used by youth. So we go over 4 different current trends. So we'll talk a little bit more about those specific drugs. The harmful effects of drugs to the developing brain. That's how we're going to start off. We're going to really talk about the brain and how it really affects our youth different than it would affect us as adults. And then strategies to prevent youth substance use. So stuff that you can do at home, or even just working with any youth or talking to any student, definitely strategies that you can use. So to get us started, we're going to start with the teen brain. So first question, I know it's early, but what age do you think the human brain is fully developed? 25? 26? Okay, so perfect. It is around 25. That part of our brain, right? We talk about our impulse control, decision making, problem solving, our voice of reason. So that's the last part to develop. So our teens, our young ones that are in junior high and high school, they're really still kind of in that middle of that development, right? They're really still trying to figure out, the brain is trying to figure out what's going on. And I mean, when you think back, I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I think back to when I was in high school, I think about the things that I've done. And then I think now and I'm like, what was I thinking, right? So there's sometimes, or something as simple as going on a roller coaster. I was all about it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. The biggest drop, the better. And now I sit back and I'm like, I'm not going on anything that drops any further than that. So that is one example when we talk about how our brain's a little bit different as we get older. Okay. Yeah, I can do some. They should be okay. So we should look at the teen brain versus the adult brain. When we look at the teen brain, we see like the LA freeway. It goes in all different areas. There's all different connections. There's your neurons, there's synapses. They're kind of all over the place, right? And as we get older, we have our adult brain. All of those connections kind of get pruned into what we use, what we need. It looks a lot nicer there than it kind of does with the LA freeway. I'm not from here, so when I saw the picture, I was like, whoa, what's going on? I'm from Hawaii. We got 3 like highways. I got 1, 2, and 3. So that teen brain really threw me off guard. But that's exactly what it looks like. We really start going from this craziness, chaos, to kind of really just pruning, really getting those off and on kind of freeways. So the one thing that I'll bring up a lot too is the statistic or this research showing that earlier, more often teens use alcohol or other drugs, the more likely it is they will become addicted. So that's why we do these presentations now. Just really letting you guys know the earlier they start, there is research shown that the more likely they are to become dependent on whatever substance. So whether it's alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, all of those 3 things is what can get affected. So current alcohol and drug trends. So we're going to talk about 4, kind of additional 5 that combines when we talk about prescription. But what are the 4 current alcohol and drug trends that you think are happening? What's going on in our community? What is popular within our kids? Vaping, definitely that's going to be one. Anything else we can think of? Fentanyl, that's definitely that's kind of the 5th add-on when we talk about prescription. So we'll talk about prescription medication really briefly, and then we'll get into fentanyl. And then the other 2 is alcohol is still very prevalent within our youth. And then we'll talk a little bit more about marijuana. So those kind of things. We'll talk a little bit also about how marijuana vaping can kind of blend in a little bit with what they're using to smoke. So the first one is, oh, I asked that, sorry. But the common alcohol trends that we'll be looking at are these 4. Okay. When we talk about marijuana, when we talk about cannabis, we'll talk about the different ways to consume it and the different types of forms they have. So the first one though we'll get to is alcohol. A lot of times with alcohol, it is still one of the highest used. So what we're doing is, as I go through these statistics, we use the California Healthy Kids Survey. So the youth do that survey. I believe it's 7, 9, and 11. Sometimes there's even a 5th, but it's every other year. And what happens is that's throughout the state of California, but we have narrowed it down to the Orange County specific. So when we talk about alcohol, and we also really kind of zone in on the 11th graders, because as the 7, 8, 9, and 11, we look at those trends, they tend to go upwards as we hit 11th grade. And so that's where we really focus on in the sense of why we want to stop it before it gets to the 11th grade. But with alcohol, 11% of students in Orange County are still saying that they're currently using. But we also use a statistic of current use. So that's within the last 30 days. So on that survey, they ask, like, have you ever used it in your lifetime? Like, have you tried it once? And then they ask you your current use. So we're using 11th grade current use from the California Healthy Kids Survey. And so when we talk about alcohol, we look at some current trends with alcohol. About the alcoholic beverages.
Started a while ago.
So how many on here do you notice have alcohol in them? 2 or 3? 3? There are 3 of them on there. Okay. But when we look at these alcoholic drinks versus non-alcoholic drinks, on the left there as you're looking, off ice, we have spritz, we have White Claw iced tea. White Claw we know comes in many different types of flavors, right? But we'll continue on as we talk about the alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. We'll definitely get into that. We bring about alcohol, we talk about risk of underage drinking. It really does affect that prefrontal lobe as we talk about impaired learning, memory. They do come out with a lot of academic problems. A lot of times, I think people or youth are thinking as well, like, nothing's gonna really affect my brain unless I'm drinking. Maybe in the act of drinking, it's gonna impair my memory. I'm not gonna remember anything. But what they don't really think about is after they finish drinking, during the day, they can still be affected. Things that they do will still, their memory and their learning, while they're in school, they might be sober, but their brain has already been affected by the alcohol that they drink. So it's something that's really important to know. Addiction, so the earlier they start with alcohol, the earlier they start, I think it's before 15, they're 5 times more likely to become addicted as an adult. So that's really important to understand after 26. Injuries, death, and violence, that's also one of the big things that when we're underage drinking, a lot of times things can happen. Fights can happen. Maybe they're not walking straight, they fall over. All of those different types of injuries, death, and violence. And then there's the alcohol poisoning. This is one of the big questions I always ask is, do you guys realize that you can die from alcohol? Especially for the youth, they're going to parties, they're drinking a lot in a short amount of time, which is what we call binge drinking. And so with the binge drinking comes that possibility of drinking too much, and our body not being able to metabolize that. And then also people can die from alcohol poisoning, if not get extremely, have some brain damage happening as well. So that's some of the risk that we talk about when it comes to underage drinking, and really trying to get our teens to really understand the dangers of it. They might think it's just fun for one night, but not realizing how dangerous it can be. Okay. The next trend we will get is vaping. On this slide, there are a bunch of vape devices. There is some liquid that's on here. How many different devices do you see on this page? Any guesses? 6. We actually have 7. So this is our desk. And why we do this is we want to show you guys how similar they look to school supplies or office supplies, right? There are 7 things here. When we look at this thing, 7 was a little bit harder to see. That's going to be one of our refillable e-cartridges here. Okay. This is going to be one of the pods. And this pod is also can be filled with marijuana liquids in here. 1 is common, 4 is very common. Those are the puff bars, and those come in a variety of flavors. For a little bit, they had to stop selling them, but now they're back on the market. So there's number 4. 3 is actually getting charged up right now, and you see it plugged into the laptop. 2 is going to be, those are the juices, the refillable ones. You just have it's a little bottle of like vape juice. You can fill that. And then 5 just is very similar in size. It's another device that can be used. If you notice, a lot of these are very slim. They're very slender, easily fit into a pocket, easily fit into a sleeve. All of these things, and that's how a lot of our youth hide them when they're using them. And they just make it very easy to be hidden within even just maybe their pencil case. And that's what makes it very hard. And what's important when we talk about it is to really understand how they are very similar to things that we might see in their backpacks. So there are different types of vaping devices here. There's the refillable ones that we've talked about, and that's that e-juice little cartridge. You would put some in there. And then there's the disposable ones. The disposable ones are the ones that we're finding very popular among the youth. Those are the ones that you use them once, and then you toss them, and then you can buy another flavor if you really want. And so those disposable ones are going to be the ones that our youth are using. The other ones, you can refill them. You can put in different types of liquids in them. I'll talk a little bit more about some devices in a bit as well. Similar as we talked about alcohol and alcoholic beverages compared to when we talk about targeting youth and really trying to make them flavorful, is they start to go off of things that we know the youth use. So they start to mirror very products like Mott's. We have Watts over there, or Candy King, or Hubba Bubba, which is whole mouthful, but they start to mirror things that our kids would be using. So they try to make them very similar. They try to make them very common, or try to make them very look like that, so that they don't know exactly what they're getting, or they know the flavor type of thing that they're looking for. So this is something that we really talk about as well when we talk about e-liquids and that common food items. So along with vaping, vaping has nicotine in it. And then when we talk about the effects of nicotine use on the brain development, we talk about the impaired learning, memory, and attention. Once again, because of that prefrontal cortex being developed, increased risk of addiction. So very similar to how alcohol, the earlier they start vaping, the earlier they start smoking, the more likely they are to become dependent as they get older. And they think that a lot of times, or when we've asked youth before, they think that they turn to vaping because of stress. They turn to vaping because of anxiety. What they don't realize is it can worsen that. It can really affect their mental health. It can give them more stress, more anxiety, more depression. And so they think they're using it to cope when actually it's really harming themselves a little bit more. So it's really important for us when we talk about this, for us as adults to help them maybe find healthy ways to cope. Maybe they go for a run. Maybe we take the family walking when they're stressed out, showing them and modeling them definitely healthy type of coping activities that they can do. Okay. The next one we'll talk about and we'll move into is cannabis, or otherwise known as marijuana. The main active ingredient is THC, so tetrahydrocannabinol, but THC is a lot easier to say. And that's the main active ingredient. It does come in different forms. We're kind of more used to, I think, seeing the marijuana bud, seeing it rolled into a joint, seeing it used in a bong or in a pipe. But they come in a lot of different forms. So what's happening now is they're starting to make some concentrates. So that's where they take out that THC and they make it a very high percentage. And then you get crumble, shatter, and wax. And they can also be starting to use in different ways. Okay, so that's one thing that's really important to know. Along with that is when we talk about cannabis, they come in, not only that, but they have so many different names, right? So you have cannabis, you have weed, you have pot, you have Mary Jane, Hawaii, we call it Pakalolo, or Maui Waui. You have all those different types of names when it comes to cannabis. So that's one thing we really encourage, is to really like listen to the youth talk. They may call it something different. They may call it by another name, but it can be, definitely has a lot of different types of slang terms. Okay, and this is how they kind of connect. I mentioned it a little bit earlier with vaping and cannabis, is we do have vapes that are styled and that have marijuana in the THC concentrates in them, and that's how they can be used. So this was a top of the cartridge, the pen that was in like the pencil pouch in the first picture that we showed you. So that's the top part of it, and that's the carts. It has that heating element in there, and that's what they can use to vape marijuana. Pod style vapes, example is Stizzy. That's like this big brand that's trying to come up. They've got like this big store. It's like a lifestyle they're trying to sell now. It really comes down to like t-shirts and advertising. Some of their shirts that they sell much look like Stussy shirts that are like, we're coming back in a little bit. So they're really trying to get out there and be known. And those are those dispensaries that get really popular, and you see their big billboards on the side of the freeway trying to advertise their store. So THC level comparison. So this is when we talk about how the marijuana or the concentrates from before is not necessarily the same as what's going on now. In average in 1995, it was at 4% of THC level. In 2014, it went up to 12%. And now with the Stizzy, with them mixing their concentrates and all these different types of things that they're doing, it's gone up to the 80 and 90%. So 91% of the THC levels. And so it's made a big jump. They're really, and that THC is that part that's going to cause that high, right? It's that part, it's that chemical that's going to cause them to feel those feelings that they're looking for. The other thing that we talk about is contaminated cannabis vaping products. These are 3 different headlines that we found recently about how there's no real like regulation when it comes to these products. Sometimes companies or dispensaries will even make their own fake little companies saying that this is certified, and they'll try to sell it that way. But what's happening is we're finding a lot of vaping illnesses, trips to the ER, that are coming linked to the heavy metals, linked to the different chemicals that are found in vapes. Another form that we talk about and we've added because of responses from youth has been edibles. So this has one, they are candies, foods, a lot of times they're baked goods, right? And drinks that contain cannabis. So they take a while to digest, therefore take longer to produce an effect. So what happens is, say you grab that candy bar and they eat a little piece of it, they sit there and they're like, I'm not feeling high. I'm not feeling anything. Maybe I didn't have enough. Then they have more. And what happens is 20 minutes later, they just get slammed by all this marijuana that they've just consumed and they're not sure what to do. Which also the more that they consume, the different types of effects they could have. If they consume a lot, it could ultimately lead to also being like hallucinating once they feel it all. So that's the risk that are different from smoking marijuana. A lot of it is just the digestion. Also, one piece might not have the same amount of marijuana as another piece. And so that's something that they need to also think about. And we'll talk a little bit more about the dosage type of thing when it comes to fentanyl and how we really don't know how much is in each bite that we take when it comes to especially drugs and alcohol. And because of all of this, there is a greater risk of poisoning just because they're not realizing that in 20 minutes, I will start feeling the high. They want that immediate, that instant type of gratification. Right. So the effects of cannabis use on brain development, really talking about attention, memory, and learning, grades and achievement. So very similar to those of alcohol and vapes. Decision making, the addiction, and the mental health issues tend to arise as well, especially when they're thinking or if they go into the edibles and they start hallucinating and all these different things affects mental health issues definitely. So then we're going to get into this last current trend that we're going to talk about, and that's medication misuse. So as we go into this one, these are your prescription pills. There's 3 different types that we'll briefly talk about before we get into the fentanyl. But commonly misused prescription drugs between our teens have been Oxycontin, Adderall, and Xanax. When we look at that Healthy Kids survey, when we look at misuse prescription, it is, we want to say at 1%. And this was from 2019 to 2021. Within this past year, it's going to be a little bit different when it comes to percentages, just because right now we're really going through this opioid crisis with fentanyl. So Oxycontin, your opioids over there, Orange County has been dealing with that issue for a few years now. Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocet, all of those things for pain meds, painkillers. After some type of surgery or getting really hurt, that's when they get prescribed, right? But people are trying to look for that high when they take it. So that's with the opioids. The stimulants of the Adderall, that's going to be prescribed to help with ADHD or ADD, to really get someone to focus and to help out that way. They sometimes get popular when it comes to midterms and finals when they have to start studying and they really want to zone in and focus. And then you have the depressants of Xanax. And these ones are going to be for your anxiety, your depression. And so we really want to say, like, when prescribed, when you're following up by a doctor or the doctor is watching you, kind of like overseeing how much you're taking when you're taking it, then yes, that is good. They can be helpful. They can help you through pain. They can help you through different things. But when we misuse them, that's where we really talk about the issues and the problems. Some people think, oh, I hurt my ankle, I have some painkillers. Oh, my friend just hurt their ankle, I can just give them to them. I'm not thinking that they could have different effects. It could affect them differently. And maybe the dosage is wrong for that person. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that when we talk about this, we're talking about the misuse of them, and not just if you're taking them as your doctor prescribed. So then we jump over to fentanyl. So what is fentanyl? You guys may have been hearing about fentanyl recently. It has affected Orange County teens in a big way. Okay, so fentanyl is a powerful opioid pain reliever that is 100 times as strong as morphine. So there are actual legal, legitimate versions in the hospital that hospitals use. What we're talking about when we talk about these fentanyl is illicit fentanyl. These are the things that are created in labs, and they are used to harm people in the sense of drugs. Okay. So when we talk about fentanyl, this is a potentially deadly dose of fentanyl. So hopefully you can see that it is 2 milligrams that can actually potentially cause someone to die. Okay, so that is on the tip of the pencil, sharpened pencil there, and that's all that's needed to be a potential deadly dose.
Thank you.
So they've been doing, thank you for jumping in on that. They've been doing a lot of trainings recently with Narcan, so that they want the public to kind of be aware of that, that if somebody is going through an overdose of fentanyl, it is a nasal spray that you just kind of shoot up the nostril, and it should, in a sense, revive them. they go into immediate withdrawals. And so sometimes they don't like that because they're there for that high, right? But with Narcan, once you shoot up there, they'll go through an immediate type of withdrawal portion. But yeah, so very close to fentanyl, similar to heroin, similar to those pain pills that we take. So those types of things. 717 fentanyl related deaths occurred in Orange County in 2021. Unfortunately, the number has rise. The DA seized over 20 million counterfeit pills in 2021. Of these 20 million counterfeit pills, 42% contained a potential deadly dose of fentanyl. So we're talking almost half of these counterfeit pills that they're thinking, our youth are thinking, or even adults are thinking, I'm going to take this Oxycontin because this is going to help me with pain. They get it off social media. They get it off of somewhere illegal. They think they're taking it for payment. It actually is laced with fentanyl. So that's what's really happening right now when we talk about the counterfeit pills, is they're trying to make pills that look very similar to actual pills. So this is where we talk about the dosage and not really sure of how much you get. So think about this. You're making chocolate chip cookies from scratch, right? You throw in that bag of chocolate chips, you mix them up real good because you want to make sure every cookie has the same amount of chocolate chips. So when it comes out of the oven, you look, oh, there's a few that don't have any chocolate chips, right? And so that's what we talk about when we talk about the dosage and not knowing. One pill could be fine and just be counterfeit and do nothing, and the next pill could die even if it's in the same batch. Okay, so that's what thing is to think about. I know I've heard stories before where it was a group of people that were taking pills, and out of that whole group, one just had a pill that they overdosed on, but the rest of them were fine. So it's really something to think about. So like chocolate chips and cookie dough, illicit fentanyl is often unevenly distributed when mixed into pills. So we say it's almost just like a game. Like you take one, you don't know if this has a potential deadly dose or not. Sometimes you could be okay. So quick question, A or B, do we know from this picture which one is real and which one's not? It was a trick question. I was just making sure you guys were awake, but neither pill is genuine. Trick question. But what they do is they do try to make these look very similar to pills that we would take, right? They're gonna make them look like the Oxycontin. They're gonna make them look like the Xanax bar, just to trick people to think you're taking Xanax, but you're actually not. You're taking a counterfeit type of pill. So really know that neither of these pills are genuine. So we've talked about the 4 different trends. Has there anything that's kind of stuck out, or maybe we have a little more questions on that we can think about? Perfect. If anything comes up, let me know. If I don't know, we can probably find resources for it. Yes. I think, thank you. I think the other thing that's important to know is that if you don't know what they're overdosing on, you can still give them Narcan, because if it is an opioid, then for fentanyl, then they will come back. If it's not, it doesn't do any harm to them. So that's one thing to really know, is that if you ever are in a situation where you have to, and each pack comes with 2 of them in there, or if you get a box, I have a box in my bag, but they come in packs of 2. And then, yeah, so you can do both of them if you need to. Sometimes you do. And if they're not overdosing on that, then it won't really affect them that much. Yeah, let me see.
So many experts in the drugs deal.
So you go through a really brief training. They give you like a training on how to use this thing. And they're doing a lot of it now. I actually haven't opened my box yet. But they do a brief training. They give you 1, 2, 3 on here. There's YouTube videos that will show you on how to administer it. And then in the boxes, you end up with 2 of these things for your use. Yeah, the way they put it in there. So they have trainings throughout. I'm not sure if, yes.
Just a question in the chat.
Is
there a grace period before Narcan does not work anymore? If someone overdoses?
Oh, that I'm not sure. I know that you're supposed to administer as soon as possible.
If you have symptoms, you go right back to it and keep administering until the symptoms go away.
Yeah. Oh, you keep it.
If they're overdosed, they're overdosed.
You just, if you see somebody overdosing, you just administer as soon as possible. The grace period, I'm not sure if there's a grace period of like 15 minutes and they're not. But like the officer said, though, if they're not responsive, you can still keep doing it until they can respond or until you call 911. Yeah, you still call 911, you administer it, and then you will wait there until 911 comes and can help out further. Yeah, so don't just administer and then run. We want to make sure the person's okay. So that's definitely what's been coming up. A lot of questions with fentanyl and a lot of things happening, a lot of trainings happening. They're really trying to distribute these out. There are going to be different school policies that your schools will be coming up with on their own. I know a lot of schools are working and districts are working through different protocols with it. Okay.
Como los tipos de dulces que ella mostró, ¿esos solamente los venden en lugares específicos o en cualquier lugar los pueden encontrar?
All those products that mimic kid products, like, are those sold in specific places? Where do they get them? She just wants to know, like, how accessible are they to students?
So with alcohol, it can be in the store. It can be at Ralph's. It can be at Vaughn's. I've seen them very similar. When it comes to the vaping, more or so they'll be like in the dispensaries or the smoke shops specific is where you could probably find those. Unfortunately, they're all over the place. You see vape shops in like small strip malls. You see them in some bigger areas. So they are all over the place. You'll see literally they just put smoke shop and like it's very bright. They use a lot of lights to get people there. And so you'll see those in a lot of different communities and neighborhoods. Yeah. Anything marijuana, a lot of the marijuana stuff you'll see at dispensaries. Those are a little less common than the normal smoke shop. But there are dispensaries throughout California. The dispensaries, you're supposed to be over 21. Yes. Yes.
Another question in the chat. Is there a reason why the vaping industry is not a government regulated one?
Money talks. Not sure exactly. They're trying to do more legislation they're trying to really kind of encompass vaping when we talk about e-cigs and when we talk about cigarettes. But that is in its process. It's still somewhat new, as weird as it sounds. And so that is why, but they are trying to get them all together in a sense of how they regulate them, but it's not really happening that way as of right now. Flavors right now, yes. Flavors was on, yes, it was. So each school will be different. So I'm not sure what the district is doing with Anaheim, but I know they're probably in that process of figuring out those protocols of who's going to be in charge of it, if it's going to be a whole school thing, and the different protocols that they'll have set. Do you guys want to add anything more about? Okay. I think I have a few colleagues that are working together with the different districts to really talk about what protocols are going to be set forth, and like maybe, I don't know if they're going to train everyone or not, where they're going to be located and all of those things. Yes. I like that you bring that up because that is something, excuse me real quick, with social media and why we're going to talk a little bit about strategies real quick. I want to get through that. But as we talk about strategies, we'll talk a lot about like social media, about being aware of what your students are on, being aware, something as simple as Snapchat or Instagram, where they can direct message somebody. All they do is direct message someone with a few emojis. They know exactly what drugs they're looking for, and it shows up. So it's really one of those things to get to look for. So thank you guys for that. If you guys have any more questions, totally let me know at the end. But I want to get to this how to take action before I use up a lot of time here. But risk factors, these are the factors that put our students more at risk. Peer pressure, knowing their friend group. Their friends can definitely put a lot of pressure on them. Lack of supervision. We know parents, we know you guys work really hard. Sometimes you have multiple jobs just in order to support your family. Unfortunately, the lack of supervision becomes a risk factor when we're not around. We're not sure what our youth are using or doing. Social media is a huge one. Not only are they able to direct message people for drugs, but you see celebrities, you see people really promoting drugs and alcohol. I follow The Rock, love The Rock from Hawaii, you know, all that. But he has a tequila that he has and he supports. And the funny thing is, like, I can just tell my friend, I was like, hey, go get The Rock's tequila. They know exactly what I'm talking about and what brand it is, because that's what he promotes. Love LeBron James, love basketball. He also has a tequila that he promotes as well. So just being on social media, seeing those influencers, seeing those celebrities when they use different products. Some of them even will smoke as they're talking to the kids, or they're going live. Some of them will do it when they're there. So social media is definitely a big one. Lack of school connectedness. We always talk about really being connected, being involved, having your students being involved, whether it's a club or an extracurricular activity, sports. I coach. I'm like always like, come on, we just need more people to play, like those types of things. So being really connected, and then the easy access is also the risk factor. We've talked about it, about alcohol with family gatherings, being in your fridge. I don't know about you guys, but for me growing up, my parents had a medicine cabinet in our bathroom, right? So any pills or any bottles that they're taking, they just kind of put it in there, close it with the mirror, thinking, I was like, I don't know what they were thinking, maybe that I wouldn't notice it's more than a mirror. But when you go to the bathroom, you just open it and you've got a whole lot of different types of pills, right? And growing up, I did have older grandparents as well that lived in our household. And so their medications were all in there. You have like pain pills, you have all these different things. Obviously, I didn't know what they were, so I kind of left them. But sometimes the curiosity might get to you. What does this do? Oh, I see grandpa taking it every day, or mom takes it every day. So those are something we talk about with easy access. So some strategies that we're going to talk about now really is, we're going to talk about communication, a little bit about monitoring, and then we're going to kind of wrap things up. But with communication, clearly communicate the risk. Yes.
There's one question from our parents.
Yes.
These types of training and presentation is it also given to the students too?
So for us with OCD in my program, we do a student curriculum, but we do it in elementary level. And so that's what we're able to do. We only are able to do it in 2 different districts. But I know that different schools will have people come in to do one-time assemblies, or maybe have a program. I'm not sure.
So when students come into high school,
Okay.
high school level, they take help.
They take help in 8th grade too, so 8th and 9th
In the
curriculum.
Awesome. Yeah, I did student teaching for health education, but not all districts have health. So I'm glad that you guys still have that. That's awesome. Perfect. So that's awesome. So with the health class, they'll learn a lot about this. I know we normally have like a whole unit when it comes to preventing drugs and alcohol. So thank you for asking. We also want to make sure that while it says easy, I'm like, communicate. It can be kind of hard sometimes. Sometimes they're not listening to you. Sometimes they're in their own land. They're on their phones all the time, right? So really taking the ways to communicate with them. Let them know also that you disapprove. Verbally saying that and telling them like, hey, look, like, let's have this quick conversation as we're starting to grow up and get into high school or middle school, and just know that, you know, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, guardians, we don't approve of your use. We know that there's dangers with it, but you verbally saying that will be a lot better than you just thinking, oh, don't worry, my kids, they know that I don't approve of that. Because sometimes they may kind of know, but they're just going to play it off like, oh, my mom never said anything, should be fine, right? So really verbally say that you disapprove of that use because you know of the dangers and, you know, and what it can do to them. Use teachable moments. So if you're watching TV and a commercial comes on, maybe it's something about alcohol, use those moments to teach or to talk to them about it. That can be your opening. Like, have you ever seen that? Or have you, what do you know about alcohol? Like, do you know it's dangerous? I like to use music because music is something that they're always into some kind of new song or new group or new thing going on. And So like I mentioned before, I coach, and so I'm with the girls and the boys all the time. And sometimes I'm like, what are you listening to? And I'll listen to it because I'm like, oh, keep me in the loop. Like I want to be, hip. I want to be cool still. Let me know what's going on. So I'll listen, and then I just stop and I look at them and I'm just like, what are you listening to? Like a lot of times they're not realizing the songs, the lyrics. They're like, oh, this just has a cool beat. This gets me hyped up, ready for the game time. But they're not really listening to the lyrics that are being said in those music. So then I use that. I'm like, do you know what Percocet is? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a good thing, but we don't want to know what that is. Like, use that as a moment of, well, that's also a drug. It's a painkiller, and it's very dangerous. So use those different moments that you have and make them teachable. And then frequently talk and listen. And listen, we say is the most important thing. Is listening to your kids. You'll get a lot of information by just sitting there and hearing them talk about their day and what they're doing with their friends and who they're interacting with. So definitely use small moments, whether it's driving to school, maybe you just pick them up, or at dinner time, those any moment you can to really talk about them. Monitoring, maybe this is one thing we want to talk about, and people are like, well, I don't want to seem like that overbearing, like I need to know everything type of parent, but it really is for their safety, right? And that's one thing you really want to make sure that you let them know is like, hey, I want to know all this information because I want to know that you're safe. I love you so much. I want to make sure that nothing happens to you. And those type, all of that. So knowing who your child's with is very important, what they'll be doing, where they'll be, when they're expected to be home, always keeping open that line of communication, establish and enforcing the rules and be consistent with it. I know when I was younger, my mom was not consistent with it. Like I could break a rule and she'd be like, you're grounded. And then like a day later, like, mom, please. And she's like, okay, it's fine. And she lets me off, right? So really be consistent in those rules. And when you make those rules or establish them, talk with your youth, talk with them so that they know that you've come to this conclusion together. These are the consequences you both agreed upon, and that's what's gonna stick. Know who your child's friends are, communicate with their parents. Your house rules are probably going to be different than their house rules. And if they're like, oh, we're going to go stay with them for a little bit, or I'm going to sleep over, or even if I'm going to visit them for a few hours, you want to know where their parents stand on a lot of issues and who they're with, just so that you know your kids are safe. And then beware of your child's social media accounts. Really understand there's Snapchat, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's so many other types of apps that are out there. There's like apps where they can communicate and text people that you won't even see on your iMessages, or you won't see if you log in. So knowing all the different types of social media accounts, very important as well. And then reducing the access. So keep track of alcohol in the home family gatherings. Maybe at family gatherings, instead of everything going into one cooler or one area, you're like, all right, this cooler in this room is alcohol. If I see you going in there, I know that's not right, right? And then this cooler will be all of your drinks and your sodas that the kids can do it. So keeping track of alcohol in the home, keeping track of medications, because we do have medications that we take, keeping track of them, lock them up, remove them from open locations, set aside unwanted or expired medications. A lot of times we sit there and we're like, great, I've got this bottle of pills and I can't take them anymore. What do I do? If you can visit ochealthinfo.com /adept, they can give you some information as well as to how to dispose of them safely. There used to be take back nights before COVID, but now a lot of times they're just giving information. Yeah.
The CVS and also the state one in Albertsons, I've seen that they have that it kind of looks like a mailbox.
Yeah.
And you can put your medications in there. You don't have to wait for a specific event.
Perfect. Thank you. That's really good to know. So visit, hopefully your local CVS has one, Walgreens. Not all of them have.
Walgreens at non-mall definitely has it.
Okay. Yeah.
And CVS on Valley View.
Okay.
And then Cypress does do one.
They do one annually. Okay. So I love it. Thank you guys for sharing, because that's really helpful to know what's in your area, to know where you can dispose of them if you need to. So perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Next steps, stay informed. We're wrapping up a little bit. Use what you've learned today. Tell your kids, hey, I'm talking about some current drug trends. I went to this presentation. Spread the word, communicate with other parents, you know. Maybe your other parents that you talk to don't know as much. Maybe you can help them out, provide them some resources. Be aware of what's going on in your community. Every community is different. We do this all throughout Orange County, And us talking to you guys, your community is experiencing things different from when I go to South County or when I go to Placentia or Belinda and all that. So know what's going on in this area, and familiarize yourself with some new trends, and as they go on. One way to familiarize, okay, so real quick review. We went over recent statistics related to youth alcohol and drug use, types of most commonly used, the 4 different ones, harmful effects to the developing brain, and strategies to prevent youth substance use. So those are all the things we went over today. One of the last ones was about keeping up with current trends. We have this resource here. If you scan it with your phone or you just write down the bit.ly code down here, you have access to it. This it's like a Google file folder that you have access to, and it has a lot of the up-to-date. We really go through it every few months to really make sure that the information there is up to date, to make sure that information is relevant to a lot of the current trends that we're seeing. So this is a good resource to have, and it also helps you provide some information on if you need resources to further help maybe a child you know or your own child, on how to get some resources for them as well. Okay. So do we have any, I'm going to leave this one up for a little bit, but do we have any questions? Kind of wraps up the presentation. I thank you guys for being here today. Definitely thank you for taking your hour of your time, for being here even more. Before you leave, I do have one ask. If there are no questions right now, is I do have a little bit of a survey to fill out. So if you guys can fill out the survey, that would be awesome. Just moving forward.